Next up, we're diving into the provocative topic of selling citizenship to wealthy foreigners, a concept that's been making headlines lately, and I'm excited to explore this with you. As we discuss, the price of citizenship is selling gold cards to the rich, a recipe for disaster.
Right, so I've heard about this gold card thing, but I'm not really sure how it works. You're telling me that the US is just going to start selling citizenship to whoever can pay $5 million.
Exactly. According to President Trump's recent announcement, wealthy foreigners will be able to buy a gold card that grants them the right to live and work in the US with a potential path to citizenship. It's a radical idea that raises all sorts of questions about fairness, equality, and what it means to be an American.
Hmm, that sounds crazy. I mean, isn't citizenship supposed to be about more than just writing a check? What about people who are, actually qualified or have something valuable to offer society?
Well, that's the thing. This gold card system seems to prioritize wealth over merit or contribution. I mean, think about it like a VIP line at a nightclub. If you've got the money, you can skip the wait and get in, regardless of who you are or what you can bring to the party.
Um, right? That's a good point. And what about the EB-5 program, which this gold card is supposedly replacing? Didn't that have its own set of problems?
Ah, great question. The EB-5 program was created to stimulate economic growth by attracting foreign investment, but it's been criticized for being vulnerable to abuse and favoring wealthy donors over more deserving applicants. It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet by putting a Band-Aid on it. You're not really addressing the underlying issue.
Hmm. Okay. So, how does this gold card system plan to vet these wealthy buyers? I mean, what's to stop, say, Russian oligarchs from buying their way into the country?
Well, according to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, they'll have to go through some kind of vetting process, but it's unclear how rigorous that will be. And Trump himself has already hinted that he knows some very nice Russian oligarchs who might be interested in buying these gold cards, which raises all sorts of red flags.
Oh man, that's concerning. It sounds like we're creating a system where the rich can just buy their way into the country regardless of their background or motives. Is this really what we want to be doing?
Exactly. I mean, think about the message this sends, that citizenship is just a luxury item for those who can afford it, rather than something earned through hard work, contribution, or genuine commitment to the country. It's like selling out our values and principles for a quick cash grab.
Um, right? I'm getting a little lost here. Can you give me an example of how this might play out in real life? Like, what kind of person would be able to buy one of these gold cards, and what kind of opportunities would it give them?
Sure thing. Let's say you're a wealthy businessman from, I don't know, China or Russia, and you've got $5 million burning a hole in your pocket. You buy one of these gold cards, and suddenly you've got access to the US market, our education system, our healthcare, all the perks of being an American citizen without having to go through the usual channels. It's like getting a golden ticket to the American dream, minus the hard work and dedication.
Hmm, that sounds unfair. And what about people who are already here, working hard, paying taxes, and contributing to society? Don't they deserve a shot at citizenship just as much as some wealthy foreigner with a fat bank account?
Absolutely. This gold card system seems to be creating a two-tiered system where the rich get preferential treatment and everyone else is left behind. It's like we're saying that money is the ultimate qualification for citizenship rather than things like community service, education, or innovation.
Um, right. I think I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal. But what can we do about it? Is there a way to make the system more fair and equitable?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Maybe instead of selling citizenship to the highest bidder, we could focus on creating a more streamlined and merit-based immigration system that rewards people for their skills, education, and contributions. It's time to rethink what it means to be an American and how we want to welcome newcomers into our society.
Hmm, that makes sense. But I'm still worried about the implications of this gold card system. Can we talk more about how it might affect, say, the job market or social services?
Absolutely. Let's dive into some specific examples and explore the potential consequences of this policy. For instance, what happens when wealthy foreigners start buying up property and driving up housing prices in major cities? Or what about the impact on our healthcare system when these new gold card holders start accessing our medical services?
Oh man, I hadn't thought of that. It's like a whole can of worms. And what about the potential for abuse or corruption? Like, how do we ensure that these wealthy buyers aren't just using their money to influence politics or gain unfair advantages?
Exactly. Those are all crucial questions that need to be addressed. Maybe we should be looking at alternative models, like a points-based system that rewards applicants for their skills, education, and community involvement, rather than just their bank account.
Right. I think I'm starting to see the complexity of this issue. It's not just about selling citizenship, it's about what kind of society we want to build and who we want to welcome into our community.
Exactly. And that's why this conversation is so important. We need to be thinking critically about the values and principles that underpin our immigration system and making sure that they align with our vision for a fair, equitable, and just society. Next up, we're diving into the fascinating topic of the H-1B visa program and its implications on the U.S. education system, Mainturias. I like to call it the Great Brain Drain Debate. We'll explore how the U.S. government's reliance on foreign talent raises questions about the effectiveness of its own education system in producing competent professionals. I mean, think about it. If we're bringing in so much foreign talent, are we doing something wrong here?
That's a great point. Right? So, you're saying that the US is basically outsourcing its workforce development to other countries through the H-1B program.
Exactly. It's like we're acknowledging that our own education system isn't producing the skilled workers we need, so we're bringing in people from other countries to fill the gap. And I'm not saying that's entirely bad. I mean, who doesn't want the best and brightest coming to America, right? But it does make you wonder, what's going on with our education system?
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like if we're relying so heavily on foreign talent, are we neglecting our own students? Are we not providing them with the necessary skills and training to compete in the job market? That's a pretty scary thought.
Well, let's look at it this way. The H-1B program is like a Band-Aid solution. It's a temporary fix for a much deeper problem. I mean, if we're not investing in our own workforce development, we're going to keep relying on foreign talent, and that's not sustainable in the long run. We need to take a hard look at our education system and figure out what's not working.
Right, right. So it's like we're putting a patch on a leaky pipe instead of fixing the pipe itself. But, what about the argument that foreign talent brings in new ideas and perspectives? Doesn't that benefit the US economy?
Ah, great point. Foreign talent can definitely bring in fresh perspectives and innovative ideas, but that doesn't mean we should neglect our own students. I mean, think about it like a sports team. You want to develop your own players, not just keep hiring free agents from other teams. You want to create a strong foundation, a strong bench, so to speak.
I never thought of it that way. So, what do you think is the solution here? Should we be reforming the H-1B program or investing more in domestic workforce development?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. We need to reform the H-1B program to make sure it's not being abused, and at the same time, we need to invest more in our education system, in vocational training, and in programs that help American students develop the skills they need to compete in the job market. It's a complex issue, but I think with the right approach, we can create a win-win situation for everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. But, what about the role of companies like Oracle and SoftBank in all this? Don't they have a responsibility to invest in American talent as well?
Ah, great question. Companies like Oracle and SoftBank do have a responsibility to invest in American talent, and some of them are already doing that. I mean, Larry Ellison, the CTO of Oracle, was at that press conference with Trump, and he's been vocal about the need for more investment in STEM education. So there are companies out there that get it, but we need more of them to step up and invest in American students.
Right? So, it's like a collective effort is needed here. Myers, government, companies, and individuals all need to work together to create a more sustainable solution. I'm curious. What do you think would happen if we were to reform the H-1B program tomorrow? Would it have a significant impact on the US economy?
Well, that's a great question. Let me think about that for a second. If we were to reform the H-1B program tomorrow, I think it would definitely have some short-term effects on the economy, but in the long run, it could actually benefit American workers and the economy as a whole. We'd need to find ways to fill the gaps in the workforce, maybe through apprenticeships or vocational training programs. It's a complex issue, but I think with the right approach, we can make it work. Next up, We're going to dive into the complex and highly debated topic of birthright citizenship, and I'm excited to explore this with my co-host today. We're calling this episode Born in the USA, the Battle for Birthright Citizenship. Now let's jump right in. Is it morally justifiable for a country to deny citizenship to individuals born within its borders simply because their parents are not citizens? This is a question that has sparked intense debate, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
That's a really tough one. I mean, my initial reaction is, no, it doesn't seem right to deny someone citizenship just because of their parents' status. But, I can also see why some people might argue that it's necessary for national security or, to prevent birth tourism. I've heard stories about women traveling to the US just to give birth, and it does seem like a bit of a loophole.
That's a great point. And it's true that some people do take advantage of birthright citizenship. However, we need to consider the historical context and the purpose of the 14th Amendment, which granted citizenship to former slaves after the Civil War. The idea was to ensure that all persons born in the U.S., regardless of their parents' status, would be treated equally under the law. It's a fundamental principle of American identity, don't you think?
Yeah, I can see that. But what about the argument that it's not fair to grant citizenship to people who aren't, really American? I've heard some people say that it's like if your parents are from, say, Mexico or China, then you shouldn't automatically get US citizenship just because you were born here. Does that make sense?
Well, that's a common misconception. The concept of birthright citizenship is actually based on the idea of jus soli, or the right of the soil. It means that anyone born within the country's borders is automatically a citizen, regardless of their parents' nationality. This principle has been upheld by the Supreme Court in cases like US v. Wong Kim Ark, which established that birthright citizenship applies to the children of immigrants.
Wow, I didn't know that. So, what about the implications for national identity? If we deny citizenship to people born here, doesn't that create a permanent underclass of stateless individuals? That sounds kinda scary.
Exactly. Denying citizenship to individuals born in the U.S. would have far-reaching consequences. It would create a subclass of people who are denied full rights as Americans, which could lead to social and economic inequality. Not to mention the moral implications. It's essentially saying that certain individuals are not worthy of citizenship simply because of their parents' status. That's a slippery slope, if you ask me.
Right. I can see how that would be problematic. But what about the argument that, other countries don't have birthright citizenship? Isn't it true that some countries only grant citizenship to people whose parents are citizens?
Ah, yes, that's true. Some countries do have more restrictive citizenship laws. However, the U.S. has a unique history and a tradition of welcoming immigrants. Birthright citizenship is an integral part of that tradition. Besides, just because other countries don't have it doesn't mean we should abolish it here. We should be leading by example, not following others.
Okay. I think I'm starting to get it. So, what's the current state of affairs with Trump's executive order? Is it, still in effect, or what?
Well, the order has been blocked by several courts, and it's likely to end up at the Supreme Court. The appellate court has rejected the Trump administration's request to pause a lower court judge's order. So for now, birthright citizenship remains the law of the land.
Whoa, that's crazy. I had no idea it was such a contentious issue. So, what do you think is going to happen next? Will the Supreme Court ultimately rule in favor of Trump's executive order?
That's hard to predict, but most legal scholars agree that the president doesn't have the power to unilaterally change the law in this area. The Constitution is clear on the matter, and the courts have consistently upheld birthright citizenship. I think it's unlikely that the Supreme Court will rule in favor of Trump's order.
Interesting. Well, I've definitely learned a lot today. Thanks for breaking it down for me. This topic is way more complex than I thought.
Next up, we're diving into the complex world of green cards, and I'm excited to title this episode The Double-Edged Sword of Permanent Residency. We're going to explore the advantages and disadvantages of being a legal permanent resident of the U.S., and our conversation today is all about navigating the intricacies of this system. So let's start with a question that gets to the heart of the matter. Can the potential loss of a green card due to minor felonies or failure to notify the USCIS about a change of address be seen as an excessive punishment, disproportionately affecting marginalized communities and creating a culture of fear among immigrants?
That's a really good question. I mean, it seems like, A minor felony could be something like, I don't know, a misdemeanor or a small crime, right? And to lose your green card over that, it does seem kind of harsh. I'm thinking of an example like, what if someone is a single mother working 2 jobs and accidentally forgets to update their address with the USCIS? Should they really be at risk of losing their residency status?
Exactly. The consequences can be severe, and it's not just about the individual, it affects their entire family. I'd like to share an anecdote that illustrates this point. There was a case where a green card holder was convicted of a minor crime, and as a result, they faced deportation proceedings. It was a devastating experience for them, and it highlights the need for more nuanced policies that take into account the complexities of individual situations.
Right? So, like, what about the argument that these rules are in place to prevent, abuse of the system or national security threats? I'm thinking of a scenario where someone might intentionally try to exploit the system, but at the same time, we don't want to unfairly penalize people who are genuinely trying to follow the rules.
That's a valid point, and it's true that there need to be safeguards in place. However, the current system can be overly broad and punitive, catching many innocent people in its net. For instance, research has shown that marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by these policies, leading to a culture of fear and mistrust among immigrants. To address this, we could explore alternative approaches, such as more targeted enforcement mechanisms or additional support systems for individuals who are struggling to navigate the complexities of the green card process.
I see what you mean. So, it's like we need to find a balance between national security concerns and individual rights. But, how do we achieve that balance? Are there any real-world examples or analogies that can help us understand this issue better?
Well, consider the analogy of a doctor-patient relationship. A doctor has a duty to protect their patients, but they also have a responsibility to respect patient autonomy and confidentiality. Similarly, the government has a duty to protect national security, but it must also respect the rights and dignity of immigrants. By acknowledging the complexities of this issue and engaging in open dialogue, we can work towards creating more equitable and just policies.
That's a great analogy. But, what about the argument that green card holders should be grateful for the opportunities they have in the US, not complain about the rules? How do we respond to that?
That's a common misconception. While it's true that many green card holders are grateful for the opportunities they've received, it's also important to recognize that they are human beings with rights and dignity. By acknowledging their contributions to society and addressing the challenges they face, we can create a more inclusive and compassionate system that benefits everyone.
I never thought of it that way. So, like, what can we do to raise awareness about this issue and advocate for change? Are there any organizations or resources that listeners can get involved with?
Absolutely. There are many organizations working tirelessly to support immigrants and advocate for policy reform. Listeners can start by educating themselves about the issues, volunteering with local organizations, and contacting their representatives to express their concerns. Every voice matters, and collective action can lead to meaningful change.
Right. I'm going to, look into that. Thanks for explaining this so clearly. Can we, explore more topics like this in future episodes?
Absolutely. We'll continue to dive into the complexities of the green card system and explore ways to create a more just and equitable society for all. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll discuss pauses for dramatic effect, the intersection of immigration policy and economic development. It's going to be a fascinating conversation.